let's dive right in, shall we? Emotionally aware forms of AI that will actually perceive and respond to our human needs. A mixed reality, which I'll explain more in a second, that will allow us to really create immersive experiences for our consumers, for the global traveler like never before. And future forms of security, right? Keeping us safe online, where we'll start to use our biological identities, things like our heartbeats, our brain waves, our DNA, to keep us safe online and indeed keep company, IP safe as well. Now, I'll be honing in on the first two today, because that's most relevant to our agenda. And I want to focus this talk very specifically on some real interesting ideas that you could use to target the global traveler in real brand engagement, immersion, which keeps on coming back for more and creates a brand imprint that I unfortunately believe is missing today. So I believe we're now at this unbelievably pivotal stage in the midst of a fourth industrial revolution, unlike anything that's come before it, and here's why. We're seeing an explosive intertwining of on, offline, and multi-sensory realms where tech is appealing to all our senses and evoking emotion, not just a cold clinical concept and kind of lines of code humming away in a mysterious somewhere. But really, even as we're becoming more digital technologies are becoming inherently more human. And a great example, of course, in some of the fantastic sort of illustrative examples that Adam presented as well. So what I'm seeing firsthand in my work as a futurist and researcher is the use of tech to drive human needs as the wrapper around our core needs, not the other way around. And indeed, for me, the three criteria that I use, instead of sifting through all the noise out there, right, because there's a lot coming at us, and we need to make sense of which of these technologies can you actually go away and possibly deploy in your brand strategy today. And what I kind of use as my criteria is it going to be a sustainable change driver, right? Is it just going to be sizzle and fizzle and blink and you'll miss it and gimmicky stuff? Or is it actually going to go the distance? The other is, does it ultimately act as a connector between you and your stakeholder, either internally or externally? In this case, your end consumer being, of course, the global traveler. And thirdly, is it really going to act as a catalyst? Is it actually going to lead to future innovation rather than just be a standalone sort of silo in itself? Now, quick context on my background. Yes, I'm a futurist, but a lot of that actually involves rigorous research. It isn't just finger in the air, here's what's coming in the future, grand postulations and random guesswork. It's actually based on heck of a lot of examination of historical precedent, of legacy, and then also speaking to and immersing myself into the people running the world's top innovation labs. And of course, rather than list all my credentials, I'd rather have other people tell you how I do what I do. I'm also a former head of digital for the world's third largest telco, Telefonica, so I have a branding background, and I'll try to infuse that into this talk. Now, I would urge all of you here to really think about exploring not just the big name companies, but actually also looking into some of the fascinating startups led by these kind of people, yeah, and this is not age specific, who are not necessarily yet running the world's top billion-dollar businesses, although they could be in a couple of years, but are really developing the next wave of provocative innovation, some of which I'll indeed show you today. I'm also a bit of a facts geek, and I am authoring a book at the moment, so I've got all my kind of handy research here. I like to give you as much detail as I can. So, your industry has evolved heavily over, I don't know, just the past 5 or 10 years itself. You've got digital signage that is now adapting itself to passenger flow based on who's disembarking and who's moving past duty-free and your stores. And your signage, your advertising, is indeed customized to them, so that's a great place to start. You've got some use of augmented reality and virtual reality, and I'll build upon that in a second. And you've got navigation apps, wayfaring apps that will allow you to stream through an airport in an interface that is incredibly exciting. So you're actually really primed for this. You're in a great starting point. And for someone like me, from the outside looking in, I'd say it's a fantastic place to start. So how can you actually stay relevant? I would imagine that two of the questions keeping you guys up at night, no matter where you are in this ecosystem, an airline, an airport, a duty-free goods store provider, or a luxury brand, or an everyday brand, some of these issues are very, very common to you all. How are you going to stay engaged with the next wave of travelers? There's also a qualitative mindset shift happening here, isn't it? And I'll touch upon that later as well. So how are you going to turn a fleeting moment of time into tangible interaction? And in fact, appeal to travelers who are not only demanding more, but giving you much less. So the latest estimates show that you've only got 30 minutes of captive, true attention from a traveler passing through an airport, some of which, in fact, will be used to, in fact, sit at a restaurant and grab a bite, to turn this into meaningful brand interaction. And how are you going to do that? You know, travelers want experiences that are not disjointed, and at the moment, there isn't a seamless experience taking place. You want frictionless shopping. You want things now. We're used to instant everything, and we want things to speak to us, to be personalized. And how are we going to do this? Well, I can certainly tell you, just giving me a sort of sample of your product in hand is just not going to cut it anymore. However, you have tremendous advantages built into your system. You've got multiple access points now to your traveler to engage with them, whether it's on, offline, whether it's during check-in, whether it's on the app the night before, whether it's at the airport. And of course, airlines and airports have a fantastic opportunity here. You act as an invaluable touch point to send people off on their entire journey. And this includes doing more to make sure you're nudging travelers towards travel retail. There are also a lot of missed opportunities, and I spotted this even more while I was en route here from London, right? So while I'm queuing, while my flight is delayed, when I'm logging on the app the night before, even on my way to the airport, and certainly whilst I'm at the airport, walking through the terminal, so many windows of opportunity, so many moments in time that were completely, utterly missed. None of these brands were speaking to me unless I proactively decided to step into a store. Frankly, I'm a big spender as well. No one spoke to me at all. There was absolutely no brand engagement, and that to me is something that we really need to work on. And indeed, as Eric pointed out, Asia Pacific is doing incredibly well. Market forecasts are very optimistic. In fact, this region is pegged to be the fastest growing in airport retail sales over the next 5 years. So that's really sit up and take notice stuff. This is where I believe creative application of clever new technologies can really help. And the geek in me wants to kind of make sense of this, envision how two particular areas, and that's what I'll touch upon today, could actually tangibly and practically help you relate to, engage with, and actually retain the attention of your global traveler, and hopefully lead to a kind of conversion to sales and impact your bottom line. So let's kick off with the first area. This is what I call mixed reality, and I'll explain what this means. So just a quick show of hands of how many of you know what augmented reality is. Okay, so that's actually pretty darn good. So augmented reality, for those who aren't completely aware of it, and I think that's completely understandable, so let's say you held up your phone, it allowed you, through the interface of your screen, to overlay digital objects into the real world. And then you've got virtual reality, where you slip a headset on, and you're taken on an immersive simulation of kind of an atmosphere or an experience. Now, VR traditionally, and you'll be forgiven for thinking this, has been used thus far mostly silly things like experiencing a virtual roller coaster or an underwater dive, as fascinating as that is, but that doesn't have enough business value. And it's certainly used in gaming as well, so for die-hard gamers, it's a big deal. But most of us have the perception of VR very much as something that's not for us, but this is set to change. In fact, recent stats show we're going to have 170 million VR users by the end of this year alone, and over 100 million headsets shipped out by the end of the year. Also, advanced forms of this virtual world are actually already being deployed in healthcare and military, in the automotive industry, and indeed also the housing industry. And I spoke at a Housing Association conference recently to tangibly drive customer interaction and sales. So why is travel retail missing out? Well, you don't have to. So VR and AR are both maturing, and this is sort of that happy marriage that I call mixed reality. but with the added element of one more of our senses, and I'll show you that in a second. And it's starting to be used very creatively by brands across the world. So we need to be setting up and take notice of this for the duty-free and travel sector. I see a real opportunity here to create immersive campaigns that allow your traveler to really see an element of discovery, something thrilling, unexpected, that really paints a picture for them of what your product could do, how it could fit in with their lives. Now, some very quick examples of brands doing this very well. IKEA and Anthropology allow you to actually see how a piece of furniture would look like in your real space. So for example, in your living room or bedroom. You've got AR and VR tours of a winery or distillery, in fact, already trialed at certain airports, indeed. And a very, very clever app that I discovered quite recently that actually allows you, if you are an acoustics or speaker company, to overlay a speaker in different parts of your room, but it would actually play back the acoustics as though it was simulating that in real life. So if you want to know how a pair of Bose speakers can sound in a certain part of your room, it would actually recreate that. So that's pretty darn good stuff. But how could we incorporate this into a retail installation, into a duty-free terminal? How are we going to use this on board? Well, actually, they're pretty good examples of that. Now, I want to talk to you about a certain type of technology called haptics. What this is doing is taking a visual experience from just visual and auditory, right, so seeing and hearing, to touch. This is very, very new, but it's something I believe needs to be on your radar right now, because you've got some people using it with tremendous impact and benefit. What this essentially is using touch sensors to break the barrier between the digital and the physical world. And I will show you how this works. So imagine then the sensation of actually touching digital objects in your virtual environment, right? So you put on a headset, and you're actually able to feel the objects that you're seeing in the simulation. So you're actually crushing a ball of snow, you're actually touching a set of speakers, you're actually feeling the sand go through your fingers. I mean, this is really groundbreaking stuff. And how this actually works, without getting too technical, is something called haptics. What it does effectively is use something called vibrotactile actuators, basically force feedback. It recreates through vibration, through ultrasound, an actual sensation of holding and manipulating an object which you otherwise couldn't do before. And of course, all of this goes well beyond gesture control, allows you to actually feel those digital objects, and it can recreate textures as well as other attributes. So effectively, the two approaches in development right now that I've been trialing extensively take two shapes. One of them is a very thin kind of set of gloves called a haptic glove. You slip it on, you put the headset on, or indeed you can actually do this without the headset on as well, and you're able to feel the objects in that virtual experience, which would be amazing for brands, right? And you've also got a bare-handed approach, where you simply have a sensor, you could see it in the bottom right of the second image there, that sends out ultrasonic vibrations, which allow you to feel as though you are handling and manipulating an object when all you're doing is grasping mid-air. There's nothing there but air. So it's absolutely fascinating. Now, I'd rather actually just show you a video of this in action, which will really bring it to life. Bear in mind, one of the clips in there shows a rather clunky kind of device. That's a very, very early iteration from 2 years ago, but I was very keen to include it because it was a fantastic way to illustrate what I mean by translating the digital into the physical. So hopefully that gave you a pretty illustrative example of how this could be applied quite tangibly. Now, some use cases of this in action, because it's always helpful to see what other industries are actually doing with something like this, and indeed to target their everyday customers. Engineering and medicine, in this case, training. Pilots, surgeons, engineers who otherwise wouldn't be able to take those risks in a very sensitive situation. They could actually train quite safely and make the mistakes that otherwise in real life would cost severe consequences. It is also being used, in fact, by architects to create models, by designers to create prototypes and early iterations. So in fact, I've seen a lot of branding and product development teams, in fact Nike are doing this at the moment, actually uses technology to create products at the very, very early stage where you could create multiple iterations of the same product, test them simultaneously, and similar to the A/B testing that Adam referenced, actually roll out 2 different versions and see which one could have more success. So this could be, for example, the design of a particular item, or indeed how something is engineered. It is also heavily being used by the movie industry to actually bring a digital poster to life. This is actually where I think it could work very, very well for travel retail, how you could actually use a piece of digital signage, which at the moment, let's face it, is completely passive. All I'm doing, frankly, and I have a blind spot to it now, is walking right past it at the airport, and it's just an annoyance. It's there, I'm not really looking at it. It's got same old advertising, and it does nothing for me as the traveler. But if you could incorporate this into a digital signage or poster, imagine the engagement from a customer. Rather than just walking straight past it, they could actually, as you saw in the video, feel like they were touching one of your products, and then contextualize it. So not just here's how it would feel to touch a product or manipulate it, but here's a context of where in my life I'd be using it, and it kind of answers the question of why myself as a traveler should care about your brand and your product. Now, it is also being used heavily by the automotive industry, where in fact, through mid-air cues, where you're basically touching the air, it allows you to flip invisible switches, quite like you saw in the video. So there's a form of this which is a touchless interface. It doesn't even require a VR headset or gloves, and that, I believe, could also be fascinating for you guys. Porsche, in fact, rolled out an Ultra HD campaign of their Cayenne Turbo recently, where it allowed a user to feel the revs of an engine without even ever visiting a showroom, and then created a personalized microsite where they could actually upload the entire experience and share that through social. So this isn't just about hooking me in at that point in time. It's about creating shareability, a virality, something that people actually talk about well after they've left the airport, well after they've deplaned and actually left the terminal. So how might you guys use something like this? It may sound a little bit far-fetched, but it's very, very realistic, very realistically in your industry. So I think this could tell a brand story to your traveler incredibly well by creating brand experiences that let a consumer actually touch and feel and interact with your ad rather than be passively served your point of view. It also would allow someone to kind of nudge their purchasing decision for something that's a little bit pricey, where they're not quite sure that they can afford it, but it kind of sends them over that edge. So that kind of segue from browsing to buying. And certainly the personalization and customization aspect. You know, I was chatting to some of your wonderful delegates earlier this morning who said one of your pain points is how to individually speak to a customer. And this could allow you to take this experience and actually create a customized digital product placement off the back of it. So I took the liberty of grabbing a screenshot, some of you may recognize it, from Glenfiddich, who in fact had a very fascinating VR experience at an airport, I believe quite recently, and also a couple of years ago. So they've been ahead of this, which is fantastic to see. Now, what it allowed was to put on a VR headset and feel as though you were in a distillery, which was absolutely fantastic, and I believe it did well for them. What if, by adding touch reality and the element of sensing and feeling, you could actually place your traveler in a situation where they were not only walking through the distillery, but they were actually able to feel the grains. They were actually able to touch kind of wheat grains and touch a barrel. Something like that would take it to a very, very different level. And the conversion rate, I think, would be incredibly fascinating to track. Now, what if you were a luxury watch manufacturer or a confectionery company or indeed a speaker brand? You might use this, in fact, to create an experience that allows a traveler to feel as though they were actually in the experience of the workmanship behind it, right? So you were in the actual workman's tools and offices, and you could touch the cogs and the intricate artistry on this deconstructed watch. I think that'd be fascinating, especially if you're asking me to drop 3,000 pounds on a watch. And a confectionery company might sound very simple of how you could use this, but actually it could work beautifully to even reach out to a younger generation, and indeed adults as well, to actually feel what that particular chocolate might feel like before it's in the solid state it is in your hand. With an acoustics brand, in fact, I know there is a speaker company trialing this as we speak, where they're allowing you to look at a future product coming up in their range and place it in their living room, in your own living room, and feel what it would be like on your wall, not just touching the product, because you could do that in store as well if the product already exists, but actually see how an upcoming product line might work. Now, where it might work very well for future products as well is allow a customer to actually feel the wonderful fabric or the suede lapel of a jacket from an upcoming season line, or indeed feel the wonderful shape of a new perfume bottle. So it's not just about what you have in store now, but actually enticing customers to come back for more, to share it on social, to say, wow, I've just experienced firsthand what this upcoming product line will look like, and it's going to be launched a couple of months from now, which then means that even once they've left the airport, they're talking about it, they're thinking about it, and they're probably checking it out in store in their hometown as well. This is actually a really good fit for airlines and airports, right? Because what you're doing is almost a natural fit for an experiential sort of interaction. Even if you chose not to have a virtual experience, you could actually use digital signage to allow someone to feel like they're actually touching the sand on a beach or running their fingers through the water, or indeed sat at that beautiful table on a glorious summer's evening at a vineyard in France holding a wine glass. So to be able to actually sell journeys and experiences and future plans for journeys as well, I think this could work beautifully. Now, there are some tangible benefits from here, but there are a couple of disadvantages. One, of course, is some of you might be thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to go away and tell my branding team to think about constructing a customized virtual reality experience. However, I don't think it always needs to work in conjunction with that. It is most effective with a headset on because it's taking the user to a completely new kind of construct and experience, but it can be used on its own with digital signage, with tabulas dotted around terminals, where it allows you to actually feel the sensation of what you're experiencing. Now, what it really could do in the future as well, one thing that I've trialed recently at an innovation lab is holograms. So you could actually have a holographic kind of representation of your product, and this could allow you to feel that. In fact, I know there are a couple of brands in this room that are working on that as we speak. Also, it's not as expensive as you might think, because I'm guessing, John, that one of the questions that will come up is, how much is this going to cost me? Is it going to break the bank? I believe it's actually more affordable than like a digital kind of product placement at the airport, on a billboard, or indeed even advertising in an in-flight magazine. And certainly one company worth looking up, I have no commercial connection to them, they're called Haptics. To me, they're at the complete forefront of this, and their sensor, I believe, is really not that expensive. So for me, something like this is about digital exploration, and hence, it's not just a novelty, because it allows you to bring to life your products in a very meaningful way. And wherever we use this, I see mixed reality as the next best big thing. Now, the other trend I want to talk about has some overlap with Adam's fantastic talk, and I want to focus on the emotionally aware forms of AI, something that actually perceives and then responds accurately to our human needs. Now, AI might feel like a really hot-button topic that's only come into the mainstream in terms of our main radar for the last couple of years, but it's been around for decades. It's been used in translation software. It's been used in gaming, even by, in fact, retail banks. So it's not a new concept. And I would completely concur with Adam's point of view that AI only will augment our existing functions rather than completely displace. And actually, it will create as many opportunities as it supposedly will erode. So I think there's tremendous value with this technology here. What I'm intrigued by is emotive AI that takes it from just a kind of clinical piece of software or lines of code to something that will actually do something for us. And in this case, it would take the shape of clever algorithms and software that just run happily in the background, kind of making it feel a little bit invisible to us. Now, a couple of stats on customer service, and I'll share that with you in a second. But I don't know how many of you would agree that when you're walking through an airport, one of the pain points for you as a traveler, indeed, and as a brand as well, perhaps, so wearing both hats, is that you've got inadequate customer service. For me, when I'm walking through a store, I've either got too many people coming to me and overwhelming me, or I've got not enough people coming to me, or someone says, I'm so sorry, this is out of stock, I can't find this for you, after I've spent 20 minutes painstakingly identifying the perfect gift for a work colleague or a member of my family. Also, you've got the issue of a lack of frictionless shopping, although this is increasing now. We are looking to create a real-time, fluid experience across channels, right from on, offline, from your app to the store, on board, once you've left the building as well. So we need to make this more instant, and this is where emotive AI can massively come into play. So I want to show you, and this is very, very new technology, something called a digital human. It's an advanced version of a standard chatbot. It's being rolled out as we speak by some really fascinating brands. And I think the best way to really show this to you is give you an illustration. Right, so all of us have our phones with us at airports. I think the latest stats are 98% of travelers, or 95%, will carry their smartphones to an airport. And indeed, what you see most often at a terminal is this, right? Head down, tethered to your device, rather than kind of head here. So actually, the best way to get to folks is indeed then through the device. They're already got their captive attention. So imagine that this is your traveler. And he's either waiting for a delayed flight, or he's queuing in line for check-in, or indeed security, or he's just got a bit of time to kill at a restaurant and he's glancing down at his phone. So at that point, imagine that this person had a sort of mental wish list of some of the things they wanted to look at in terms of products at the airport, either from a luxury brand, an everyday brand, or a duty-free store. But they didn't quite know where to start, or they wanted more information on a certain product. In fact, that's what happened to me en route here. There's something I knew I wanted to buy, but I just didn't have enough information. And I thought, how am I going to squeeze this in terms of actually going in there and checking on this product, when I've got to eat my lunch, I've got to actually look at my speech for today, I've got to chat to my children, and then I've got about, 5 minutes to spare before I go to my boarding gate. So imagine just at that point, when you needed it the most, either through the app for the airline, either through the e-commerce site for your brand, either through even the social media profile of your brand, because close to 72% of customers now take to social to ask a brand information about their product. So that's becoming more and more present. Imagine then that you saw one of these two faces on your screen. So really friendly, welcoming faces, right? And imagine that he or she smiled at you empathetically, acknowledged your state of confusion, excitement, ambivalence, whatever you're experiencing at the time. And in most cases, you're sort of frowning at your screen. So let's say, hypothetically, you looked a bit confused. It would acknowledge that, and it would actually talk to you as a human would, the same voice that a human might have as well, looks like a friendly human, and ask if they can help. And then less than 3 minutes later, you close the app, you're done. You close the website that you've got on your digital browser, and all your concerns have been addressed. Possibly even an actual purchase has been made at the duty-free store, and all you've got to do is pick it up. Or, and indeed I know Thomas Cook are trialing this, there is a way to have the products that you purchase actually delivered to your seat. So imagine it did all of that for you. I think that's absolutely fascinating. So when they need it the most, something like this would appear. It might also be something that you can use actually on a digital screen. So you could just walk up to it and activate it in that way as you would on a digital screen that's around the terminal. Now, on your phone, you could choose to opt in. But how it actually works is by using the front-facing camera on your device. It actually views your face, and it actually understands your emotion at that very point and talks to you as a person would. Now, for those worried about privacy, or as Adam said, you can choose to opt in or out. You could actually decide, I don't want it to see me, I just want to use it without it actually being able to acknowledge my state of mind. And you could do that. You wouldn't get as much as you could out of it, but it would still work. So not only does it actually evaluate your emotion in real time, it could actually have high computational ability that then looked up product information in real time, was able to sync to store inventory, tell you what's around, compare it in lightning speed, right? So this is much, much, much faster than a human actually could, and with none of the moods of an annoying customer service person who's having a bad day and decides to take it out on you. Now, if you want to look it up, one of the companies that are pioneering this, again, no commercial connection, they're called Soul Machines. They're based in New Zealand, and they're absolutely at the forefront of this. It's being used by Daimler, by Autodesk, by NatWest Bank in the UK, and indeed it's also being rolled out by Air New Zealand, and that's to follow in a video. So I'm about to play you a video of this in action that will really bring it to life. Let's take a look.
Everything they do is related to what the person's doing that's interacting with them. So by giving the computer the ability to have a face-to-face interaction is just really adding a whole new layer of enhancement of communication between people and technology. She can respond to the user's behaviour in real time to help really facilitate the communication and the interaction.
You're going to get the same sort of emotional responses and the non-verbal communication cues that you'll have if you're sitting face-to-face across the table with a real person.
I connect with you in a human-like way by sensing your reactions and responding emotionally. Wouldn't you rather speak to me than a faceless chatbot? Nice to meet you.
Well, at Air New Zealand, we're exploring lots of different digital innovation, and the reason for that's very simple. We know there's lots of pain points and frustrations that we can solve with digital innovation. We want to make the experience better for our customers. Well, artificial intelligence is one of the big areas that we are very focused around, and we've started initially with Oscar the bot, and then now we're partnering with Soul Machines, which is an absolutely fantastic New Zealand company, to create a digital human called Sophie, who's also powered by IBM Watson.
Economy Sky Couch is a row of 3 economy seats that turn into a couch in the sky.
And the whole purpose is really to investigate, to explore the role that digital humans can play in improving the customer experience.
It was like talking to a real person.
She's very clever, knows a lot about New Zealand.
It was really cool.
So something like this could actually create an invaluable emotional connection between your traveler and your product, allowing them to experience it in a very different way. And who doesn't like to walk away feeling like they've used some clever new technology when they're engaging with your brand? So how and why might you use this, right? So you could activate this through an app. You could have it on a digital screen where you just walk up to it and start talking to it. In the example I showed you from Air New Zealand, it could be on an e-commerce site, a brand's social media page. And these are just ideas I'm throwing out there. So there's probably a lot more you can do. In fact, indeed, within even duty-free desks or information desks, and actually on board as well. But using emotionally responsive avatars that look and sound like us would, even though they're an AI-powered illusion, create the kind of connection that you can't hope to have from simply logging onto an e-commerce website or simply using an airline or airport's app, right? Because that's really quite a bland interface that doesn't give me really anything beyond my proactively tapping through 5 levels of screens. But really, for something like this, I believe there's also real value for brands to harness that conversational data and use it to make better business decisions and actually feed into your business model. It would also allow you to make inferences on which parts of that interaction with your product, and understanding from point A to point B how someone gets from a set of page results showing you, for example, a set of jackets, to actually going through the shopping cart and then purchasing the one one that you had in mind. It might even show you what those customers' pain points were around the way, which parts of your online interface are just not working for someone because they're stuck or they kind of just jump out at that point. And in fact, it's doing that for a well-known brand as we speak. But also, it could give you post-transactional feedback, which would be very valuable. I mean, for me, something like this does have a limitation in that what it's missing is human consciousness. It's missing empathy. It's missing human intuition, right? But it doesn't need to have those things because all it's doing is complementing existing forms of interaction with your consumer and indeed customer service. So as the computational ability of something like this ramps up, eventually will lead to a place where you've got this technology talking to us and it feels like it's a face-to-face interaction. So these are sort of two areas that are top of mind for me and I feel need to be actively on your radar. But this statistic is one that I want to wrap up my talk with, and it kind of drives it home for me, you see, because I believe that creative use of these new technologies could actually ramp up brand imprint, brand sales, loyalty, and keep customers talking about you because no one wants to be irrelevant. And indeed, as your traveler becomes even more digitally empowered, no matter if they're Gen Z, 14 to 19, or millennials, 18 to 36, no matter where you are in that sort of demographic, something like this would actually go a great way in creating that brand retention. And you see, our expectations of what we want from the travel retail experience have dramatically shifted. And if you don't keep up with that now, you're going to be left kind of sitting on the sidelines rather than being one of the change drivers. And I believe the travel retail industry can absolutely do that to maximum capacity and incredibly well. Ultimately, I believe we now have line of sight to a reality that may feel a little overwhelming for us in terms of the digital services and tech that are coming at us, a lot of noise out there, but one that is as exciting as it'll ever be. We're at an absolutely pivotal stage, and we must not let this go. And ultimately, I want to see technology act as a sort of invisible interface between ourselves and our device, such that you actually start to forget that it's even there. Right, thank you very much for having me, and I hope you have a fantastic morning.